Welcome back to Living with a Classic and part 2 of my Christmas special. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll put a link to it up above and down below so you can check that out if you want to get caught up. But just a brief recap, in part 1, we went behind my neighbor's house out in the woods behind there, and we found an old abandoned little gray Ferguson tractor. It's been sitting for years outside, and we started to see if we can get it going. Part 1, just sort of went through it. We saw that the engine wasn't seized, it turned over, we took the spark plugs out, sprayed some lubrication down there, also removed the starter, which apparently is broken, and we took the carb off as well and brought those back here to the workshop. So in today's video we're going to see if we can get the carb sort of rebuilt. We don't have a rebuild kit or anything, we're just going to take it apart, clean it up, and hopefully it will work and go back together. We're going to have a look at the starter again. Once again, don't really have a rebuild kit or anything, but let's see if we can figure out what's wrong with it and see if we can get that starter spinning. Because otherwise, in worst case scenario, we'll have to hand crank it, but it would be nice if the starter works. If you haven't seen part 1, you might not know that we're just doing this just to see if it gets going. There's absolutely no budgets, no nothing. The idea is to get it going where it sits and drive it away from there, and then it's my neighbor's decision if they want to fix more things on it. But I just want to see if I can get it going and basically get it going with just parts and tools and things I have at home. So let's have a look at that carb and the starter here, and then we'll go out back to my neighbor's house again and have a look at the old tractor. The first thing I want to look at is see what the carb looks like on the inside. Ideally you would want a rebuild kit. I don't have one, so we're going to see if I can make do with what I have or if I need to get a rebuild kit. That's why we're looking at it first. Once again, it's not a restoration, it's just getting this thing to run, sort of seeing if we can get it running as it sits. Some people suggested just, putting fuel in it and seeing if it turns over. However, I just want to have a look inside the carb first so I don't put a bunch of gunk in the engine, and also this is probably going to be gummed up inside. So we're going to start by cleaning the outside. Just got some, this is just brake cleaner here, using as some degreaser. Let that soak for a little bit. I'm not going to clean it up too much right now because I'll clean it up more when it's all apart. Just don't want any of this gunk going inside it when I take it apart. So I'll clean this thing up a little bit more. Then we'll take these screws up here on the top, split the thing apart, see if we can save that gasket and see what it looks like on the inside. It's definitely not perfectly clean at all. However, it's clean enough for me to open it up and see what it looks like inside. See if I have to order a rebuild kit. Then I can split it apart, let the thing soak overnight, and then it should be a lot easier to clean it afterwards. But I just wanted to clean it a little bit before taking it apart. And you can see it was definitely really, really dirty. So we got the screws on top here. I'm going to be really careful so we don't share anything. They're turning really nicely so far. That one also. So one more right over there. And one over here. Okay, that one's a little bit stiffer. Alright, starting to loosen up now. We're going to see if they're all the same length so we don't mess them up, but usually on these carbs the screws are usually, it's pretty easy to identify where they go, but let's just check. I've never had one of these apart before. And yep, they're the same length, so no problem. It's a very cute little carb, especially when I'm used to working on, the big 2-inch SUs. These are very cute. If you look at that little opening in there. This should be the last screw, and then I think I'll grab a little bit of a rubber mallet, see if we can get this thing apart. Hopefully save that gasket in there. starting to split. There we go. We get that smell of old gas again. Okay, let's see if we can save the gasket. Okay, gasket has been saved. Has shrunk a little bit here, I can see, but it's not a very complicated one. So worst case scenario, I can actually just make a new one for now. And I know that that might sound a little bit silly because you can get a rebuild kit, but I'm on a little bit of a tight time frame here. I wanted to get this thing running, and I think it would take probably 2 weeks or so to get one. So even if we get it running and it does leak and have issues, I might still order a kit and then rebuild it once more. But now we'll just see if we can get it running. So I will remove the gasket here carefully. Then we have some jets there that we can have a look at. We have a float there, but I'm just going to remove the gasket, remove the float, and then I'll just let all these things soak overnight in some solvent, clean them up. Before I soak it and leave it overnight, I just want to show you what happened when I took the float out. You can see all this dirt and debris in here, and that's why I did not just, put fuel to it and try and start it. You see how much dirt and debris? I don't know if you can see, but it is pretty dirty in there and full of stuff, and yeah, all of this came out. So that would just clogged everything if the jets are not already clogged. So that's why you take carbs apart and clean them. If they've been sitting for a long time, see the float? It looks fine, so hopefully that actually floats. And we'll have to have a look at the needle valve up here if that's working as well, but it probably is. It's probably just sticking a little bit. Take that part, clean that as well, but first let's just soak all these things overnight. When we come back, it should be looking a lot nicer. While the carb is soaking in some degreaser, let's have a look at the starter. The owner of the tractor said that the starter hasn't worked for a couple of years, and at least the last time he started it, which may be 5 or so years ago, they used the hand crank. So I just want to see if there's any life in the starter at all. It could be a wiring issue on the tractor itself, or it could be the starter itself. He also mentioned that before the starter went out, they had to use a screwdriver on the starter solenoid for a couple of years because the switch in the gearbox did not work either. So all I've done is hook up the negative here on the body, have the positive here from a battery I have here on the ground. Let's just see if something happens. And it is absolutely dead. Let's see if I just twist it over a little bit. Alright, it's absolutely dead. Let's open it up and see what it looks like inside. I mean, it could have a bad winding or something, and then I'm not going to do anything about it. Then we'll just use the hand crank. But let's see if it's just some dirty brushes or dirty contacts or something simple. Okay, let's open this up. I haven't opened up a specific starter like this one before, but I've opened up a couple other Lucas starters, so they should look pretty similar inside. And I'm not going to go in that deep. I just want to see if I can even get it working, but it could be burned up inside and I can't get it fixed. Undo these as well. And like we said before, this is definitely not a restoration at this point at all. It's just a little bit of fun seeing if we can get it going. So not going to spend any money on this thing at the moment, because if this doesn't work, we'll just hand crank it and hopefully that will get it going. But it would be really nice if the starter actually worked. Now I think it's just the big screws back here. Those are quite long. Okay, it's all pretty much loose now. And there is that. I'm just seeing if I can see anything that looks burnt on it. Nothing looks burnt, actually. Really, I mean, None of the main windings here look burned. This is a little dirty, but really it's not that bad at all. So I think we'll put this to the side for now and see if we can have more of a look at this part here with the brushes and everything. So I'm not sure if you can see anything inside there. I'll move the camera up on the workbench and I'll see if we can get a better light in here and have a look inside at the brushes. Grab the flashlight as well, so let's see if we can see anything on the inside. We got the brushes down in there. Once again, nothing really looks burnt or anything, so I think I'm just going to see if I can get those out somehow and see if all the connections are good on them and see how dirty they look. A little bit of off-camera troubleshooting later and cleaning, I do have an idea of what I think is wrong. So all I've used is a multimeter to check that there are no short circuits. And the windings here seems to be perfectly fine. And I just cleaned this up a little bit to see it's all nice and shiny. I had the brushes apart here and just took the back plate off. And I just put that on when I realized I should have filmed it. But yeah, I just took the brushes out and I measured everything. They're fine. 2 of them are connected to the positive here. The other 2 are connected to earth. All of that is fine. All the magnets and stuff in here, all that is fine as well, and all that connects to earth. However, as you see here, I've started to clean up the surface here and clean up the surface here as well. So this is where it bolts to the block. So this is where it gets the earth connection, or the negative connection to the starter. That's where I have the clamp for the starter cables as well. It also gets it through these bolts as well. All of this was really dirty, so when I had the multimeter on here, and see on here I did not get a connection at all. I had to scrape off some of the rust and I finally got a connection. So I'm hoping that could be the issue, just really hoping. So I'm going to continue cleaning up all this area here with a wire brush, this area here as well, clean up the threads here, clean up all of this, put it back together and see if it spins into life. Really sort of a let's really hope this works, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I always do have the hand crank, but it would be fun if I get this working. Okay, it's a couple minutes later. I have just cleaned up all of the surfaces here with the Dremel tool that we talked about before. So I wore away this steel brush all the way, but we're getting good earth connections now. These are not the greatest jumper cables. I should have gone and got my other ones, so maybe there's an issue with them having a good connection as well. These are just the ones I've had laying around. The good ones I have out in the car, but it's raining outside. I don't want to go and get those. But I have everything hooked up again. I checked that I have 12 volts on the cables, so let's see if it actually works this time. Fingers crossed. Let's see. Seems to be working really well. And the drive is being pulled in again. I'm gonna just move the camera a little bit so you can see that working. If you have a look at the gear over there. So that is working no problem at all. So now we just have to put the carb back together. Then we can put this on the tractor, the carb back as well. Let's see if we can get it going. And here's that little carb all back together. It's definitely not my finest work by far. I'm almost a little bit ashamed of it, but we're on a time crunch here and also a absolute zero budget. So I cleaned up all the important surfaces, and a lot of the stuff is really stuck on there quite hard. It's just, like almost edged into there. So this would have to soak in ultrasonic cleaner or something for a long time and then get a small brass brush to make it look really nice. But it's not what we're going for right now. We're just going to see if we can get this thing going after it's been sitting. I reused the old gasket in there with a little bit of gasket maker, so that should hopefully be fine. I did check the needle and seat. That was stuck, so I lubricated it up a bit, and now it's moving nice and freely and can blow compressed air in there, and then when I push it up it closes. So that seems to be working. Clean out the flow chamber, clean out the jets, all of that. I have been over at the tractor just to have a look at the fuel system. I plan on taking the tank off. However, it's almost like those bolts holding it in are so rusted in place. I don't dare take them off right now because I think I'll break the tank. So all I did was I put a bottle under it. I opened up the tap and I found that one of the tanks it flowed out really easily out of, and it looked pretty clean what came out. I mean, it smelled terrible, but it looked pretty clean. So For now, we're just going to put fresh gas in. I've completely drained that side. Hook up fresh gas to this thing and see if it goes. The only thing left to do here is to make a little homemade gasket. I'm just going to use some gasket material and cut out a gasket for the intake there. Then we'll mount this again to the tractor. We'll put the starter back on, hook up a battery, and let's try and see if we can get this going. But I think we're going to have to look at the ignition system first. So I will make that gasket, then we'll head on over to the tractor. Today is actually the first day in a long time where I have some available time and it's not pouring down rain outside. I have considered a few times if I should hook this thing up to my tractor and drag it over to my place, but it would be fun to see if I can get it going here. And also it's been pouring down rain, so that hasn't really been a fun thing to do either. So I've done a couple of things off camera here. I've been out here for a little bit. One of those is, of course, I found the crank. There were a couple people in the first video who told me that they saw it the whole time. I wasn't aware that it's supposed to sit right over there, but now I found it, so that is very logical. I've checked that the engine cranks over easily on the crank. With the crank, there's no issues at all. And I've also set it up on one of the lobes here for the points, so we can replace the points. I'll have new ones and set the point gap there. The other thing I've done is I've tested the battery. There's actually some voltage in it, only like 8 volts, so no way it would start. However, I don't have a spare battery that would fit in here, so I just brought a big battery and some jumper cables and hopefully we can get that working. I've also gone through some of the electrics. So this switch up here seems to be ignition, so when that is switched that way, I believe it is, I checked, there is power going to the coil. So far so good. Like I showed you before, I have drained this tank and I poured some new gas in there. I opened this up, let the new gas flow out on the other side. I have mounted the carb on there with a homemade gasket. I've removed the air inlet pipe just so we can have a more look inside. It was overflowing a little bit at first, but I gave it, you know, the old whack with an adjustable wrench on top of there, and it stopped leaking. But I've turned off the fuel supply for now, so there is fuel here in the bowl. I checked that from the drain. So all of that is working so far. So the next thing I want to do is change the spark plugs. I do have new spark plugs, a new rotor, new points, and new leads. So we're going to put that on just to give this a maximum chance, because believe it or not, I'm going to have to hand crank this thing. I put the starter back on and I did not hook up the wiring from the tractor, but I just used a spare battery, sort of like I did before in the workshop. And it kind of spun the engine over for half a turn and now it's completely dead. It basically shorts when I put it on there. So we're going to ignore the starter for now. Let's see if we can do it by hand since I don't have that much time out here. The light's going to go away pretty soon. So let's see. Fingers crossed we can at least get some sort of life out of it. So let's see. I'm just going to take out these plugs that I put back in last time after we sprayed some lubricant in the cylinders. So I'll take out all the old plugs, put in new plugs, and then we're going to tackle the points. Right after I turned off the camera, I changed my mind. I'm going to leave the plugs out because let's test the ignition system first. So we're going to replace the points. Then I'm going to hook up power, crank the engine over, and see if we have spark before we put plugs in. It'll be a lot easier to crank it over without the plugs in there. Here is a new set of points. And the points are in here. So it's just basically, if you don't know what points is, it's a contact breaker. So it opens and closes a contact. And hence for doing that creates a spark. I'm not going to go into details of how they work. However, if you would like, I could go into a more detail in a future video if you're interested in seeing how points work. See if these are very much stuck in there or not. That's the adjuster one and the other one. All right, there we go. Gotta get this off here as well and that off. So I'll remove the old points and then you can see when I put the new ones in, and we're going to set the point gap. I've got the old points out now, so let's just put the new ones in. So this part goes in first. And there is the sort of fixed screw over here, and then the adjustment screw is on the other side. Gotta be careful so I don't drop anything here because there's no way I would find it. Here is the other part of the points. So it goes this way around. So here is a connector where they hook into, and then they sort of bend around. Let's see if we can get this. This is quite fiddly. Can tighten that back up, and then we'll set the points gap. I know it's not ideal to use an adjustable spanner like this one, but I didn't bring anything this small. I didn't think that would be anything this small that I had to bring, so it's either this or walking back to my house. So I'm using this. Okay, I had to loosen everything up again because I just wanted to test that when this is open, there should not be a connection between that side of the points and this side, and there was before. So I think that the connection here was grounding out. So I've loosened everything again. I'm going to see if I can get a better connection in there like that. See if it grounds out. This time it's not grounding out. Okay, I'm going to try and tighten it down now the way it is. There we go. Let's just try it one more time. No connection between there, and of course we have a connection there. So that is all good. Now we're going to set the points gap. I looked it up. It's 22 thousandths of an inch, so that's what I have here. Setting the points gap is really easy. Just make sure that you're on the lobe. I'm pretty much dead on that lobe there. Put in the feeler gauge that it's supposed to be, and then tighten it down. And take it away, make sure that there is a tiny, tiny gap. So if it will focus, as you can see, there's a gap in between there now. This distributor seems to be pretty worn, so I can move it quite a bit. So if I move it that way, see it's closed, open, closed, open, closed. And that's how your points work. But there are lots of ways to check ignition, and I'm probably going to check in a few ways. But the first thing that I just done now is I hooked up the extra battery, turned the ignition on, and I'm just going to carefully move this back and forth, and you should see some sparks there. You see those sparks there? So that is definitely making and breaking contact. So far that's working. Let's put on some more things and see if we actually have some real spark. I do have some new ignition components I could fit, but it's sort of a shame to fit them in case nothing works. It was good to change out the points because the old ones were really burnt out and they weren't making a good connection, so that's fine. But I'm going to wait to fit the other things until we know if it works or not. I found the old rotor and I've cleaned it up, so it's not perfect, but it should at least make a connection. I mean, these are pretty simple old machines, so there we go, that's all on. And I cleaned up the inside of the cap as well, so hopefully that's going to be fine. At least I think it should be fine to get this thing going. I mean, it ran when parked, so I think that we're good on that point. Now all I need to do is put the cable from here to the coil back on, and then let's see if we have spark before we go any further. Okay, so what I've done here now is I've just put the cap back on. I've put in one spark plug loosely so I can still crank it over pretty quickly. Yes, this is not the correct lead for that spark plug, but it's just a long one. And I put on this little light here, which is spark tester. So if I do have spark, this should light up. So I'm going to go and crank it now by hand, and hopefully we can see something on there. I could see that was sparking from here. I looked under license plate. Hope you guys could see as well. At least we know we have spark now, so that is really cool. New points are working. Everything else seems to be working fine. So I'm going to put the plugs back in, or put the new plugs in, hook up the leads, and let's see if we can actually fire this thing up. Theoretically, everything should be ready now to see if this thing will start. I'll hook the extra battery back up. We'll lower this down, and then we'll pull out the choke, set the throttle a bit. I've already opened up the fuel and no leaks this time. And let's see if this thing will actually crank into life. One thing I've forgotten to mention, that if you ever use a hand crank like this one, don't crank it like this, because if it backfires, you will hurt yourself, you can break your thumb. Crank them like this. In case it backfires, it will just fly out of your hand, and you should hopefully be as safe as you can be hand cranking a really old vehicle. Okay, battery is back on. I'm only using it for the ignition, so a bit of an overkill with that big battery, but should be fine, and it's not touching up here. Okay, going to absolutely double check that it is in neutral, but otherwise I've cranked it over so many times it should have moved already, but we're definitely in neutral. So we got no leaks over here on the carb, and I have the ignition set on, so this side is on, the other side is off. So we're going to move the throttle. I think this way it opens it up. So yeah, we'll open it just a little bit. We'll also see if I can find it down here. Pull the choke. I think it's very cold outside, so we'll use full choke to start out with. And I'm gonna make sure it's in neutral. It is. And yeah, let's see if it fires into life. Nothing so far. Let's try it a little bit more. That is quite a workout. I've already shut the fuel off in case it is flooding. So I think I'm going to open up the throttle to max, turn the choke off, and just spray some Go Juice in there, some Easy Start. And let's see what happens. Not even the smallest hint of trying to fire. All right, this is quite a workout. Since I'm losing the light and I can start to feel some raindrops, I think this is where we're gonna have to end this episode. We're so close though. It has spark. I get really quite tired from cranking this thing over, so I think I will have another look at the starter, see if I can get that working, and then I'm gonna have another look at the carb as well, see if it was actually flooding or if that was something else. So I ran out of it. It didn't really look like fuel, so maybe I'm not really sure what's going on. But anyways, even though it didn't start, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and in the next part, hopefully this thing will get going and then we can take it for a little bit of a drive. At least that's the part. I'm not going to give up on this thing. I think I will be able to get it going. Anyways, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. It really does help out a lot. And until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.